wabarakatuh, and welcome and hello live from the Greenwood Institute YouTube and Facebook page. You are with your host, Nasser Hussain, Radio Dawn Station Manager. I hope you're all well. And thank you for joining us again. Today's special session, mashallah, is from across the world, from Dubai. We've got our guest joining us today. So alhamdulillah, we're really excited about that today, alhamdulillah. Just to let the viewers and listeners know that this show will be repeated, this session will be repeated on Radio Dawn this Saturday morning at 11 a.m. UK time. So that'll be 11 a.m. till 12 p.m. inshallah. So you can listen to it on the Radio Dawn airwaves. This session will also be recorded on the YouTube and Facebook page of Greenwood Institute. So should you wish to watch it again, you're welcome to. And please do share widely. It's a very important topic. We're talking about Islam and evolution. A lot of people talk about, do we come from apes? Do we believe in the Big Bang Theory? Does the Quran say anything about that? Are there any great scholars of the past that mention these things? This is the session to find out, inshallah. Any questions you have, inshallah, do pass them forward to us, inshallah. We've got Dr. Shoaib Malik, who's the assistant professor of natural sciences at Al Zaid University in Dubai. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shoaib, and how are you today?
Alaikum salam, alhamdulillah. Nasser, thank you very much for inviting me to your show.
MashaAllah, thank you very much. I know it's all the way in Dubai, and I think about 3 hours ahead, so it's pretty late at night. We do appreciate you taking the time out, mashallah. Alhamdulillah, thank you very much. And Dr. Shoaib, I know before we start, inshallah, we want to know more about yourself. So the people might be thinking, Dr. Shoaib from Dubai, who is this guy?
Hello, Brother Nasser. Brother Nasser, I think you've
carry on, he'll reconnect.
Right, okay. I think Brother Nasser was asking about my background, so I'll just quickly introduce myself. So my name is Shoaib, and I'm of Pakistani origin. So my parents are from Pakistan, but my father and I, we were born and raised in Kuwait. So I've been in the Middle East for my entire life. Went to a British system, so finished my A levels. And then at the age of 18, I decided that I wanted to go to UK for my studies. And then I hopped on to University of Bath, where I did my undergrad in chemical engineering. And then I topped the cohort there. And because of that, I got a scholarship at Nottingham University to do my PhD, again, in chemistry and chemical engineering, which I finished back in 2015. Since then, I've realized I don't want to do chemical engineering as a professional journey. I decided to kind of put that on the side and work more toward Islamic theology and philosophy. And there are many areas that I kind of went around with, and it finally stumbled upon me that maybe it's the area of science and religion, or the particular conversation of Islam and science is the right, place for me to kind of work on my research interests. And so for the past 4 or 5 years, I've been working on the topic of Islam and evolution. And the idea here is to kind of just make sense of a conversation that is true to your tradition, but also can engage with a contemporary dilemma that is troubling so many Muslims today. Evolution is something that unfortunately, even raises doubts about faith, about Islam. So I thought it was a need, and I worked on it for the past 3 or 4 years. Alhamdulillah, I'm glad the book is out.
So what we find out today is that you've been to Nottingham before in 2015. That's something we didn't know.
Yeah. So I actually graduated from the University of Nottingham. It's actually the place where I started practicing Islam. Before then, I was a very cultural Muslim. So there are many key people at Nottingham. So Brother Shujahat Aslam, if you're watching this, and I miss you. There are many people in the ISOC Society. I remember going to Masjid Umar, a bunch of other places, like Radcliffe, and what was the name of the street? I forgot the name of the high street where the food where all the food shops were lined up. Do you remember the name? What was it called?
Alfreton Road.
Alfreton Road, that's the one. Yeah, alhamdulillah. So so many memories there. But mostly I stayed around in Beeston and Dunkirk, mostly because my campus was very close. So the engineering campus was very close to Dunkirk. But in my first year, I stayed in Beeston because there was a particular accommodation for postgraduates there. So I didn't kind of go to the main city too much, but only in the second and the third year, I kind of explored. It was my best time in the UK. I love Nottingham.
MashaAllah. I mean, looking through your bio on Facebook, it's like you just can't stop studying. You do one course after the other. Some people just do one course and it's like, I've had it for life. But MashaAllah, you just keep continuing. You're never stopping.
No, for me, like we have an expression. My mom calls me this kitabi kira. So somebody who's always like into books and reading. So for me, reading started when I was 16. I used to read a lot of fiction books. And it really kind of dawned on me that when I started going into uni, particularly Nottingham, this is the funny part. My I already had a natural inclination towards reading. But what got me into this particular trajectory in terms of developing myself was actually my supervisor and my father. My father said that you need to make sure you stand out. What is your X factor? Every other person could get an A grade or a first. What makes you distinct? So that's when I realized, hang on, I just can't do a bachelor's degree. I need to do many other things as well. And then on top of that, my supervisor, he was an atheist. And he started asking me questions about Islam that I had no clue about. So when I was 21, this is when I was in Nottingham. This is my first year in Nottingham. I didn't know what the word inshallah meant. This is how ignorant I was back then, right? Yeah, I didn't. 10 years ago, I did not know what that word meant. And so when I started looking into it, that's when I realized there's this whole thing about Islam that I don't really know about. So since then, it's just been, going in and just improving yourself. And as you said, books are the best friend that one can have. It's always a constant learning experience. You never get tired of it.
Not just that, because obviously I follow you on Facebook, and every other post that you send is always a new truckload of books that have just arrived. I'm thinking, where do you store these books?
So I mean, there's a bunch of stuff. So like, my wife is sick and tired of it. I've got a shelf here in the living room, which I had to compete for. I had it my own personal room, my own office. But then my son, when he turned 3, we decided to give him his own room. So we moved everything to our bedroom, and then half of my books are in my office, which I just dumped there. Books that I don't really need at the moment. But yeah, it's kind of all over the place. Some are at my parents, some here, some all over the place.
So clearly you don't believe in the concept of minimalism then, really?
No. I mean, when it comes to books, no. I mean, like, the thing is, like, I know there's this culture of e-reading, but for me, it just doesn't work. I come from that, generation where books is the main criteria to learn from. I do, search online whenever I can, but I need the feel of the paper, highlighting and all of that. I can't do it otherwise.
So not just the studying at Nottingham University, but you also had other links within the UK. You were involved with the Maturidi Institute, I believe it is, Avicenna Academy.
Yeah. It was initially known as Avicenna Academy, so I did some studies there. Did some studies with Sheikh Ali Admim Institute, and now I'm currently working with Al Balagh Academy, which is run by Dr Rafiqat. So just various areas, but right now I'm in Al Balagh Academy and doing the Alamiya program just to kind of work through that. I also teach there as a teacher on instructing them on science, religion, Islam and evolution, religion and philosophy. So a bunch of things, alhamdulillah. Actually, this very Saturday, I have a class on Islam and evolution.
Mashallah. So you've written quite a few papers, I think, before, and I think, not in terms of books, but I think you did a few papers before, but now you've actually gone into producing books and stuff. But you're mainly, like I said, you're mainly into Islamic sciences. That's what you're into. Why would you go into, evolution? And I think a key figure that you keep mentioning is Imam Ghazali as well. Was he someone who had an influence on what you do today?
So this is a bit of an interesting backstory. When I first, I literally mean this when I say this point. When I was 21, I had no clue about Islam. So all these different movements, figures, sects, and all of that, it made no sense to me, right? So in the beginning, I just picked up a book on Imam Ghazali, and one brother told me, this brother is kafir, don't read his books. Another brother told me he's amazing. And I didn't know what to make of it back then. So I was just very doubtful of Imam Ghazali. So I was in a very particular mindset back then, very, very cautious. And so I started reading, and I became very strict for a while. Then I kind of loosened up. And then Imam Ghazali kind of really took me on this path of moderation. So whenever I read his works, his entire corpus of all the books that he's written on Kalam, on Sufism, on fiqh, whatever have you, all of that for me was such a balanced way of looking at the world. And since then, I've become so fascinated with his worldview that I decided to kind of really take this as my mode of looking at life. And so when I decided to do that, I wanted to see how we could use his ideas to engage with contemporary discussions. So this includes atheism, it includes problems coming out of science, evolution being one of them. And so how I narrowed down to evolution was, I'm generally interested in the interface of Islam and science. And there are many conversations people are having here. Are miracles real? Does God exist? What are laws of nature, et cetera, et cetera? Quantum mechanics, does that really disprove God? Evolution was a big one because I feel out of all of this, it really, really is the most controversial territory in this entire domain. So you have even, ulama who say, if you believe in evolution, you're a kafir. I mean, that has been declared by some ulama. Other people, they said that ulama are backwards. We just need to get them out of the conversation, which I don't believe in. So I really wanted to hear everybody out as best as I can, go through their arguments and then try to understand how you could navigate this landscape through the perspective of Imam Ghazali. And that's what I try to do in this book. So this is how evolution kind of tied up with Imam Ghazali, because the actual book, the subtitle is called Islam and Evolution, Al-Ghazali and the Modern Evolutionary Paradigm. So this is how these two worlds kind of came together for me.
So just before we continue, if you can just let us know, how do we get a copy of that book?
So there are two options. Alhamdulillah, somebody actually paid for this book to be open access. That individual believed that this should not be behind a paywall. So anybody in the world can now download it for free. So I've sent you a link, and I think you can put it on your YouTube and you can download it. It's available, no paywall whatsoever. So if you're a PDF guy, this is perfect for you. That's one avenue you can get it from. The other is just your local bookstore, Amazon. You can buy it off. I recommend waiting for a year if your pockets are a little bit tight, because they only have the hardback version. So this is the hardback one. The paperback is usually much cheaper. So this is currently going for 120 quid, which is a lot. It's extortionate. I completely empathize with it. So I recommend waiting out for a year if you're interested more in having a hand copy.
I think Jazakallah for making the PDF available. At least we can have a quick read beforehand.
It's just, please pray for that individual. That person wishes to remain anonymous, but that individual paid £12,000 to make this book open access. Literally in one go, that individual paid £12,000.
Fantastic. So, I mean, there's a lot of material out there on Islam and evolution and so on. Why did you think that you had to add to that?
So, I mean, there are a lot of extremes that I see in the literature. So we have some people who kind of completely dismiss evolution, and this can be in the form of da'is, ulama, whatever have you. And don't get me wrong, I'm not criticizing these people. I'm just saying that some of the way they kind of convey evolution, or how evolution is in the scientific sense and the kind of implications has, is very caricaturish. It's like you're trying to get individuals like Ben Shapiro to represent Islam. It's a very, very simplistic understanding. So, and I felt that's what made the conversation very difficult, because you have a lot of simplicity. And it goes the other way as well. So you have scientists who are rock hard in their scientific understanding of evolution, and they believe ulama or Muslim scholars, they need to step to the side and let us do our work. This is true. You want to scribble over theology and the debates about the Quran, that's your concern, but we believe in it, and we just somehow reconcile with the Quran, either believing in metaphors, whatever have you. So because I felt that this was a very outlandish way of looking at the conversation, there were a few exceptions to this trend. One was, I think, Sheikh Yasir Qadhi's approach. I really like the way he kind of handled the conversation. I think there's that phenomenal event that happened in the UK under the Dean Institute with Adam Dean, where they had invited scholars from all over the world, and Yasir Qadhi presented in there. So, and then he published his ideas in the Yaqeen Institute in a 2018 paper with Nader Khan. And then also, in addition to that, I felt there's an individual called David Solomon Jalajal, who's not so well known in the social space, in the radio waves, but he wrote a book in 2009, which kind of really took Islamic theology very seriously. So in that book, he took a common denominator of the Ash'ari, Maturidi, and the Salafi worldview. So for those listeners who don't know what these are, just like how we have schools of fiqh, so Shafi'i, Maliki, Hanafi, Hanbali, we also have schools of Aqidah, Ash'ari, Maturidi, Salafi. Of course, they have their squibbles between them, but this is generally Sunni Islam. And so he took a common denominator of those three schools and tried to evaluate evolution. And I thought that those two approaches were very rigorous and academic. These are not the only ones, but these are the ones that were available in the English language. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to narrow the conversation to one school of thought called the Ash'ari school, and really crank up the conversation. So go through all the different opinions that I can find, that are very diverse from one another, very different to one another. So there are 20 different opinions that I cover in this book, ranging from complete acceptance to complete rejection. And then I look at the conversation both theologically. So is evolution, for example, something that God can do to begin with? Can he operate through chance-like processes? That kind of question is in the theological territory. And then the hermeneutic territory, or the Quranic territory, is where you look at, can you reconcile evolution with the Quran, when the Quran is quite clear that one, Adam was created miraculously, two, Eve was created miraculously. All of us can trace ourselves back to those two individuals. So how do you reconcile with evolution, which says that all of us are related to monkeys somehow? So with that conversation in mind, I try to make evolution very sensible. So the language is written in a way where even an 18-year-old child hopefully can read this. And I've tried and tested this with my own students so that the language is digestible, inshallah. But then, of course, it builds up, and you have to kind of work with the pace. And I felt that this is a need both in terms of clarifying some of the misconceptions, but also providing suggestions. So I don't provide a resolute conclusion, this is the opinion. I'm saying these are the possibilities, you make your mind up.
Fantastic. Now, obviously, you're an academic yourself, PhD upon PhDs. Now, one of my questions was, is this really suitable for someone who's below 18? But I'm assuming you're saying someone who's got a certain level of education before start reading this kind of material.
Yeah. I mean, like, I've even had sharp kids who are 15, 16, they've been able to go through it. So you can make the conversation simpler. There's no doubt about it, right? I'm just saying that in this material, in this particular book, there's some conversations. This just require you to delve a little bit deeper. So for that, I would say you need maybe to just kind of have a dictionary with you, or just make sure you're familiar with some of the terminology. But I explain everything either in the main text or in the footnotes. And on top of that, just to kind of make it easier for people, I've actually paid a designer some money to kind of have diagrams in there, so that even if there's a concept in there that's difficult to comprehend, I've tried to have the diagrams in there to make sure that they're easily conveyed, inshallah.
Because what you tend to find nowadays in books is there's a lot more pictures now, because people tend to understand better with pictures than words. So I think something like that you mentioned is good news for a lot of us, because I think a lot of people don't read books nowadays. It's all about scrolling on social media and stuff. So if you've got pictures, people will be more willing to.
yeah, definitely. I mean, like, my plan is to have like an e-version of this book. And what I mean by that is an online video bite-sized series. So for each chapter, have like
Fantastic.
10 videos, each one 5 minutes long. So that if you're driving down the road, or you want to just get a very quick info bit about books ideas, you can access those, inshallah. But that'll be coming out soon, later on.
Yeah, I was going to say Audible is a very popular format nowadays, especially with a lot of people who are in the cars all the time commuting. So I think that'd be a fantastic resource in your own voice, really, for something like that.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. We'll see what happens, inshallah.
Then, inshallah. So, because we obviously talked about Imam Ghazali. So in terms of your book, I think what you're saying is that you give people a better understanding and then leave them to make a conclusion at the end. I think that's what I get, the gist of it.
Can you repeat that?
So what you're saying is that you give people better understanding of what Islam says about evolution, but you're not giving a firm conclusion at the end. You're leaving it open for people to get their own understanding out of it. Is that right?
So nearly. So I definitely make the conversation clear. That's true.
Yeah.
But what I mean by that, I don't give people opinions. I'm just saying that out of all the opinions that are out there, I'm very resolute that these opinions are unacceptable. Yeah. So X, Y, Z cannot be accepted in Ghazali's framework. But these possibilities are there. So I kind of demarcate between what is acceptable or not. Okay. And within what is acceptable, there are different options. So that's what I meant by when I said that I give people options to think about, that these are valid territories.
Fantastic. So apart from Imam Ghazali, were there any other influences in terms of, Islamic science that interested you? Was there anybody else? Because I know that, for example, for Yahya ibn Sina for medicine, obviously he's well known for medicine, but I know there's quite a few, I know there's a lot of clash between Ibn Taymiyyah and Imam Ghazali followers, like, in terms of the way they approach certain things. Did that kind of come into the conversation when you were studying these issues?
So as I started delving into this territory, I kind of started to acknowledge that everybody is going to have beef with one another. There's always going to be squabbles, one way or another, right? And that's just because we have different, sometimes, paradigms. We disagree over certain verses or whatever have you. And what I wanted to do was just kind of look into Ghazali, but also not ignore wider perspectives. So while I was writing this book, I acknowledged that there are other valid paradigms, or paradigms people could explore. So people could look at evolution from an Athari paradigm, Maturidi paradigm. Those are all options that other people need to take up on. It's just that my familiarity with Imam Ghazali, that's why I decided to do it through his scope. But I do say at the end of the book, it'll be fantastic. It'll be amazing to see what would an Ibn Taymiyyah framework look like when it comes to evolution, or an Avicennan idea. All these things are there. Now, what I've actually done, and this is something that I have no problems making public. So we actually have a book coming out in 2022-23, inshallah, where we summarize all the different major paradigms in Islamic thought. So Mu'tazili, Athari, Ash'ari, Avicennan paradigm, Sufi paradigm, whatever have you. And we discuss how their paradigm looks like in the conversation of science. And that book is being, I'm the project leader of that, but it's a 13 academic workforce. So we have 13 academics from all across the world, each one who specializes in a different area, one on Ibn Taymiyyah, one on Ibn Sina, one on Ibn Arabi, etc. that book will be, I think, the first step to having these kinds of broader conversations. First, enrich people with the tradition. These are the perspectives that you can find in Islamic intellectual heritage. And if you follow or align with these perspectives, this can give you some idea in how you can converse with contemporary questions coming out of science. So that will be coming out. So I don't ignore other perspectives. It's just that I make it very clear, both in my public and my academic discourse, I follow the Ash'ari paradigm or adopt it, and this is what I'm most inclined towards. That's it.
Alhamdulillah. Because when we mention Ibn Taymiyyah, we understand it to be Quran says this, Hadith says this, Quran says this, Hadith says this. When we talk about Imam Ghazali or those type of people, we talk about the more rational. Does this make sense? Does that make sense? Rather than they're trying to explain a lot of stuff. So in your book, I know you used Imam Ghazali, but the approach you used, is there a lot of Quran and Hadith in there, or is it just trying to explain terms in a way people can understand rather than what the Quran and Hadith state about this? Is that how you've done it?
So two things. As I got to know Ibn Taymiyyah, and when I started reading books about Ibn Taymiyyah, I actually realized he's not as simple as that. It's not just Quran Hadith. It doesn't work like that. That is maybe a modern appropriation of Ibn Taymiyyah, but that is not how Ibn Taymiyyah actually writes. His books are very dense and philosophical, and you have to take a lot of effort to understand what he's doing, what he's saying. So he definitely is one of the most philosophical Salafi or Athari proponents that you can find in Islamic intellectual history. When it comes to my own book, so Ghazali is very clear that you have to use both aql and naql kind of hand in hand. So this book has an average of both. It will definitely go through the verses when need be, but it'll also give the commentary and some of the philosophical and theological exercises to understand the points that I'm making in this territory.
So would you recommend, before getting into your book, because obviously you said that you have to be at a certain level, you need to know the terms and so on, would you recommend any basic reading beforehand, because I know you mentioned Ash'ari Aqeedah, that's something you're into, and I think Ash'ari Aqeedah is not something the layman can understand anyway. It's something which is, a lot of scholars say you don't even need to know, some people don't even need to know whatsoever. So would you recommend people get a basic understanding, and if they have that basic understanding and then possibly move on to this, would you recommend something like that? Is there anything you'd recommend?
So even if you had no experience, let's just say with the different paradigms that are out there, even if you had zero experience, you would be able to understand the book. You may not necessarily agree with the Ash'ari paradigm, and I make that very clear. I'm not saying that Ash'ari is the be-all and end-all. If you disagree, that's fine, right? I'm also not saying that Ash'arism is problem-free. It has its own sets of issues, theologically speaking, just like every other school. So I make that very clear. So even if you have zero perspective, zero acknowledgement or affirmation of some of these other ideas, you can still engage with the material. Of course, however, it does help that you have some training in theology. So if you've gone through the Hawi's text, or if you've gone through some of the basic Aqidah Nasafi, for example, the Sharh al-Aqad, so those kind of things will help. But of course, if you haven't had that, I kind of lay out the basics enough to kind of get you into the conversation, inshallah.
Fantastic. So you mentioned about the bigger project that you have in 2020, 22, 23 that you're working with others to release. But in terms of this book itself, will there be a follow-on to this, or will it be that next project that you're talking about? Would that be the follow-on to this book?
So there's a couple of things that I'm working on right now. Right now, I just want the dust to settle because this came out just recently, May 2021, this year, right? So I think that people need time to mull over it. They need to think about it. I'm actually looking forward to criticisms about this book. People have already engaged me saying, what about this point? What about this point? What about that point? So I'm just kind of, going through the motion myself. We are actually doing a summer school right now in Indonesia with the Quran Institute, with the Quran department, Usuluddin department. And they're going to be students who kind of go through the material. They'll dissect it. The professors are going to look at it. So I think this conversation needs to happen at a more finer level. And then once I collect all of these ideas and conclusions of what other people are saying, perhaps another book might come out. We definitely have one in the making right now. This is going to be mostly just a Quran-only book. So within the Quran, there are multiple discussions that need to take place. So for example, where was Adam created? Was he created, in heaven or out of heaven? Was that garden on earth or in heaven? So there's multiple opinions in tafsir. So to kind of go through everything point by point by point is something that I'm going to be doing with most likely, inshallah, David. But that will come out maybe in a few years' time, inshallah.
Inshallah. I mean, we don't want to go through the whole book itself, but maybe you can give the viewers now just a little taste of a passage in the book and just trying to explain. Is that possible? Could you do something like that?
Yeah, of course. So, you mean of this one or the one coming up?
The one that you've got at the moment. So
yeah. So in this book, simply, it's a very simple idea, right? You have the theory of evolution. Now, in very simple terms, what is the theory of evolution? It's just three simple things. One is known as deep time. So our earth is really old, right? It's not just 10,000 years that we used to believe. So in the Quran, sometimes in English translations, I still see sometimes 6,000 years old or 10,000 years old. This is because we borrowed this from Christian biblical narratives, which we don't need to, affirm ourselves to. And so that's the first thing. Deep time, the earth is really old. Islam has never had an issue with this because there's nothing concrete in the Quran about it. The second proposition of evolution, and this is where the real thing kicks out, is so all of us have mothers and fathers. Our mothers and fathers, they have their own mothers and fathers, and so on and so on and so on. Evolution takes the same concept just for the entire biological world. So it's not that just humans popped into existence and then therefore we sprang forth. It's that humans must have had a mother and father species. So humans came from a prior entity, right? And so if you rewind the tape of life, you can actually see the tree of life, as the metaphor usually goes, right? Just like we have family trees, pictures of family tree networks. The same thing, evolution says all of us are biologically connected. Humans are not an exclusion to the process. So that is known as common ancestry, the idea that all of us are connected. And then the third thing is just the mechanics. How does evolution play out? There are two things here, natural selection and random mutation, which you don't need to really worry about. That's a different conversation, right? So these are the three things that make up evolution. Time must be really old, common ancestry, we're all connected. And three, there are specific mechanics of evolution, natural selection, random mutation. And that's what makes up the Darwinian framework, the taboo word, Darwinism, right? That's the Darwinian framework. Now, the thing that sticks out the most, or there are a couple of things that stick out of this conversation for us. Okay, there are a couple of things. Number one, in the Quran, crystal clear, all right, or rather it's zahir, it's very apparent that Adam was created miraculously, Eve was created miraculously from Adam somehow, and then all of us come from these two. So how do you square this with evolution? That's a big question mark. Scientists are telling us that our genes, we have genes that link us very strongly to chimps, which show that we are somehow, connected in a family-like network. You know how we do genetic testing to test there's a mother and father of a particular kid? The same kind of genetic mechanisms are there to test, whether we're related to other entities or not, other species or not. And so we have a very close proximity, gene proximity to chimps and monkeys, etc., whatever have you. It's not that we come from them. It's that we share a family with them. So no one in evolution never says that we come from monkeys. This is a very famous caricature that exists in the popular mindset. It's just that they're like our cousins. We just shared an ancestor. Something existed before that kind of connected, like a great uncle, whatever have you. Okay, so that's that territory. And so this is where Muslims find issues with the Quran. Evolution seems to contradict the Quran. How do you navigate this discussion? Again, there are multiple opinions that people have discussed over the matter. So I will leave that there. So this is the scriptural issue. Then there is the theological issue, right? The theological issue is, so we have, as Muslims, all of us have an understanding that one, God exists, and God has a specific nature, and he acts in the world in a particular way, right? So he can do miracles, he can change whatever he wants, etc., right? This is the kind of God we believe in. Now, evolution says that we were created through natural processes and through random processes. Is that really befitting of God? Does God work through chance-like processes? Because astaghfirullah, people have said that, do we believe in a dumb God? Astaghfirullah. But that's the implication. Do we believe in a dumb God? Right? And a couple of years ago, Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, he got into hot waters by saying that I have no problem that God creates hot waters for that, right? But they're all of these ideas, so both the scriptural and the theological discussions have a lot of nuances behind them. On the apparent level, it's a very simplistic discourse. Astaghfirullah, it's haram, kufr, bye-bye, salam alaikum. But that's what I try to break in the book. I try to say, okay, so these are the verses, right? These are the opinions. What is valid, what is invalid? This is our understanding of God according to the Ash'ari paradigm. This is what he can and cannot do. So can God use chance to create us? Yes or no? So these are the kinds of things that I explore in the book. And that's a summary of what I try to do. I hope that kind of conveyed what you were trying to do.
I think that's very fascinating. I don't really want you to stop there. You might just get through the whole book by writing. I didn't think that.
That's it. But that's what I try to do. So in terms of structure, the first half of the book is just completely setting the stage, completely, right? So chapter 1 is about the science of evolution, because I wanted to kind of normalize what evolution is. Because when I say evolution, this guy is thinking atheism, this guy is thinking Marxism, this guy is thinking about whatever ism connotated with evolution. So I try to kind of put everyone on the same boat saying, this is what I mean by evolution according to evolutionary biologists. And in there, I go also through the theory, the history of evolution, and also some misconceptions. So many people think that Darwin was an atheist, for example, and he created this theory so that atheism could spread everywhere in the world. This is completely false, even according to the best historians of biology and science, but written by Christians. So this has nothing to do with that. So I try to clarify that in chapter 1. In chapter 2, then this is a full exposition, a summary of all of some Christian responses to the theory of evolution, right? And many people saying, hang on, this is a book about Islam. Why did you bring Christianity into the discussion? Well, evolution, Charles Darwin was a Christian initially. He wrote in a Christian context, and therefore the first engagement that evolution had was with a Christian lens, right? So many people, many philosophers, theologians, scientists, since the dawn of Charles Darwin in 1859, that's when he wrote the book, right? Since then, Christians have had the longest engagement with this theory. So they have a lot to say. And so I kind of tease out 4 different camps and explain to you how and where these guys have issues or embrace evolution. And then I do that for a very specific reason, because in the next chapter, chapter 3, I give you this, what I call the standard narrative. So for the past 1,000 years, what have Sunni Muslims believed in, right? Adam and Eve created miraculously, and then all of us come through there. And I give the verses, the hadith explanation. And then that chapter also compares the Christian opinions. So what is a problem sometimes in a Christian thought is not a problem in Islamic thought. So for example, some Christians believe the earth is 6,000 years old because of some scriptural mechanics in there. But Muslims have no problem in believing in older. 0 problems. Even if the earth is 1 billion years old, 2 billion years old, makes no issue. But for some Christians, it is an issue. That's why we don't have something called young earth creationism in the Muslim world. We don't have that. So I do that to kind of make that comparative analysis clear that some of these are Christian issues, these are not Muslim issues. So we have to keep these separate. Then in chapter 4, which is I think where most people might be interested in terms of getting an understanding of the landscape, is I review 20 different opinions in the literature. So this includes people like Sheikh Nukeller, Yasir Qadi, Harun Yahya, who's very popular, right? Zakir Naik, etc., etc. And then some people so I show how some people completely reject evolution, and some people completely accept it, and there are positions in between, right? So there are 4 positions I develop in the book, and I remain consistent to those, and I just lump people in these positions. So that's chapter 4, and then chapter 5 is a historical piece. It just says that there's some people today in the contemporary landscape who are saying that, hang on, Muslims have always believed in evolution. And then they refer to texts written by Rumi, Ikhwan al-Safa, Ibn Khaldun even, right? They'll say, oh, Ibn Khaldun talk about, there were minerals, there were plants, monkeys, and humans, like that kind of stuff. But I show that historically speaking, they were not talking about a scientific theory. It was more of a philosophical perspective where there is no science processes involved in this. So there's a very bad misreading of these historical scholars, and you're imposing evolution onto their works. So if you read the paragraphs properly in their chapter, in their rightful places, you really begin to see that this has nothing to do with evolution. So that's why I put that chapter there. So these first 5 chapters kind of just set the stage for you. They set the stage. Then the next half of the book is the constructive part. So how does Ash'ari theology look like? What does it look like? And how does it engage with contemporary questions? So in chapter 6, I introduce the Ash'ari paradigm. So what is God? How do we understand God in terms of laws of nature? Are miracles possible or not? And then once I establish that, then I deal with 3 specific issues in that chapter. The problem of chance, which is problematic for a lot of Muslims. Naturalism, that nature is all there is, because that seems to be the main gun of atheism, right? So Richard Dawkins says, now we have evolution, khalas. We don't need religious folks anymore, right? So we talk about naturalism in there. And then we just kind of try to tease out exactly what are the nuances of each of these things, and what can we accept and what can we reject according to the Ash'ari paradigm. This is the chapter 6. In chapter 7, I kind of go through the intelligent design. So this intelligent design is huge, absolutely huge. Like Harun Yahya propelled it to, a very heroic and respectful status. So I criticize ID. I actually criticize that according to Ash'ari theology, this is a very, very bad perspective to hold on to. So that's what I do in chapter 7, and I show why Muslims should not be committed to this kind of framework, why it's problematic. And then in chapter 8, some people say that evolution is also ethically problematic, because if evolution is survival of the fittest, people have used evolution to create political schemes, right? Communism, Marxism, kill the poor, kill the weak. We don't need them because it's all about survival of the fittest. So I kind of show exactly where the problems come from and how we can filter them through the Ash'ari paradigm. So chapter is all about ethics in light of evolutionary thought. And then the last two chapters is all about Quran and Hadith, scripture, right? In chapter 9, I just lay out, I develop Ghazali's usul, how would he interpret the Quran. Now, unfortunately, we don't really have tafsir written by Ghazali. He did have one of sorts, but it never came down to us. So we have to extract his usul from various places, right? So he's written a few treatises. I just kind of extract. How does he understand the balance between reason and revelation? I go through that. How does he understand natural sciences? I go through that. And then also, how does he understand hadith? Because in this conversation, many people, they say, oh, it's an ahad hadith. We reject these hadith because evolution is true. So I kind of make sure I go all of these nuances in there. And just to kind of show, this is what I mean by Ghazali's framework when it comes to interpreting Quran and hadith. And then what I do in the last chapter, chapter 10, is I take Ghazali's framework and then apply it on the different opinions that we reviewed in chapter 4. So if this person said, how would he respond? If this person said this, how would Ghazali respond, etc. And then I just reach my conclusion in the last chapter, and I have a table in there where I say, this is acceptable, this is acceptable, this is acceptable, but this is not acceptable. So I just kind of lay it out there. So it has a very progressive nature to it. The first half is, it's just descriptive stuff. The second half is constructive, and hopefully you'll get a full 360 understanding of the conversation about Islam and evolution.
So I'm just writing notes at the same time, just for my benefit. Sorry, man. It's like I'm in a lesson. That's what it feels like.
No. Oh yeah. So my wife criticizes me. You always go into teacher mode when you talk about your stuff.
You know what? I think you filled in a big gap because you talk about Ash'ari. Now the thing is, before I go into that, now living here in the Western world, being a Muslim, practicing sometimes, if I'm in a certain environment, I'll feel uncomfortable, like praying or something. Although I'll do my prayer, I'll feel uncomfortable because I know that someone's asking me a question I won't be able to answer. And it's always around evolution rather than, where we come from. That's what it all boils down to. And sometimes I feel scared. I think, well, actually, I won't be able to answer that. I don't know how to. I believe I'm convinced, but how do I explain it? Especially here, living in the West, especially academics, when you go to university, these are the kind of things that even teachers, raise these concerns, and that's why hence you'll see a lot of students leaving Islam because they think, hang on a minute, I didn't know this. So there's nobody there that can turn to. Instead, they'll believe what the teachers say or what have you. And as we know, this is a Christian country, the UK is, but it's more of an atheist country now. That's what a lot of people are teaching nowadays. So hence we see a lot of people leaving Islam. Do you think your book would be a significant contribution to people at the academic level who may not be able to justify what they do, why they do it? Do you think this will fill that gap nicely, which will give them a solid foundation intellectually to prove to people about Islam and evolution?
So I don't like to blow my own horn in this regard, but because I wrote this book from a couple of lenses, right? One, as a concerned father, my son is in this world. He has to face the challenges in this world. So as a parent, what do I need to teach him? And I think this every parent sympathizes with this point. What can I teach my child to be able to address contemporary questions? Two, I wrote this as a Muslim in the sense that this is a problem. How do I deal with this? How am I going to navigate this conversation, right? So that's why I took clearly a theological approach, because what does it mean to be a Muslim? That you have a worldview and there's some red lines. If a Muslim starts saying we believe in 3 gods all of a sudden, you're out of the fold of Islam. So there is a red line. Somewhere there's a red line. So highlight the red lines, and then within the fold, what can you accept, what can you reject? This has been my approach. So once I've highlighted those red lines, within the fold, there are a couple of options. And that leads me to my third point, which is as an academic, right? This book will, I think, satisfy those nuances. People who want to go detailed, and they'll be able to understand, okay, with this possibility, there's this, and this. With this particular issue, there's these possibilities. So great, that makes sense. So if I personally believe that if, inshallah, once those bite-sized videos come out and they couple it with the reading of this book, I think that parents, young kids, academics, Muslim ulama, they'll be able to appreciate what is in this book. You may not have to agree with me. I'm happy with that. If you find a hole and you want to criticize on it, great. then write a response, and then build up the arguments. This is how ulama did in the past. Ghazali wrote a refutation of Avicenna. Ibn Rushd wrote a refutation of Ghazali. Ibn Taymiyyah wrote a refutation of all. So, right? So this is how conversation builds up. So, and I hope to see other books that come out in the conversation that elevates the discourse. But I feel that my book, what I had in front of me was ulama. They were my main category. I wanted to really approach ulama because these are the most important people in Muslim communities. Whatever they believe gets trickled down. So if they can just understand this book and the nuances therein, it can help with kind of then spreading these ideas out there, at least as possibilities for relief, if you believe what I say in here. And then lay audience and also academics. These were my three main groups that I was looking at when I was writing this book.
I think some of the stuff that you mentioned when you're going through the structure of your book that I picked out is, especially living here in the West, is we've lost our tradition in a way. Or we get books nowadays, the Grand states that we've lost all these books, especially like Imam Ghazali, like you mentioned. And I think it's fantastic that someone like yourself is bringing those teachings back into the West. Of actually, this is how the greats thought of the world around them in the past, and how we should approach that. Some of the stuff that you mentioned was Ashari teachings. I know Ashari and Maturidi, if you mentioned that nowadays, like you mentioned, does anybody know what I'm talking about? The fact that you're saying that question shows that, there's ignorance surrounding Muslims where we've lost our tradition, and the fact that you're bringing those teachings back to us from the Arabic sources into English, I think it gives us a great opportunity to access your literature and start understanding what did Imam actually say and how does that relate to us in our times. How can it give us a better understanding? Also, the views from other scholars, like you mentioned, Yasir Qadhi, you mentioned Sheikh Nur Khaila Hamza Yusuf, by bringing, you've tapped into those sources, and we don't have to go out to tap into those sources. Rather, you're bringing them to us in one concise form, and I think that's fantastic. Views from other religions, so we can understand the country we live in, which is a Christian country. How is there, how can we come onto common terms with them? And I think that's a very important thing that we need in today, especially Dawah, is how can we come to common terms where we can improve each other's understanding and work together to improve the society we live in? And I think that's fantastic. And also a better understanding of Islam. Mm-hmm. So giving us back our tradition. And I think it's a great, I dare to say, but it seems like, in a way, you're reviving our traditional Islam again. Sheikh Nur Khaila Hamza Yusuf did that, but I think it slowly faded away. But now you're bringing that back in so we can get understanding of what our scholars actually taught about, where we come from, how can we justify, and increase our iman at the same time. So I think I may just purchase that hardback version. I'll leave the PDF to the side. I think I'll just get that hardback version, and maybe I can get you to Nottingham and sign it for me at some point as well. Inshallah.
I really
just before we go on, is there any possibility of you coming into the UK? Will you be touring UK at some point, or coming for a holiday or something? Or
if all goes well, I'll be there permanently.
So what was that?
If all goes well, I'll be there permanently. I'll be back in the UK permanently. Inshallah.
No, inshallah, that's fantastic, because we need to get down here in Nottingham, inshallah, back to where it all started.
Yeah, no. Nottingham is really, I say this with full sincerity, that Nottingham is where I found Islam. It seriously was the place. I really thank a few people, most importantly, a catalytic. There were a few brothers, but I think Brother Shujahat was, he was the guy. For those of you who are in Nottingham, you should know Brother Shujahat. If you don't know Brother Shujahat,
no, we know he's actually the chair of the Muslim Masjid Council here in the Nottingham as well. He got elected this year, so
I wouldn't be surprised if he became mayor. That's how I'm confident in him. Mashallah, I wouldn't be surprised. But he's really one of the most pivotal people in my life. Like I pray for him a lot. Mashallah, he's one of the most amazing individuals. Really inspired me and really kind of really inculcated that thirst for knowledge. He's the one who really put those seeds in me there. Alhamdulillah.
Inshallah, maybe if you have spare time, maybe we can do something over Zoom, or if you do come to Nottingham, we could do like a day course where people can purchase your text or PDFs, and we can just do like a day thing and go through that with yourself, inshallah.
Inshallah. The plan is hopefully once COVID kind of dies down, and I hope permanently dies down. But once that happens, then there might be some opportunities for stuff like this. I was planning to go to the UK for like a conference in London where I was going to present my book, but because of just these different buffers, governmental policies, and just all these restrictions in place, it just becomes more and more difficult. So let's just pray that things settle down, and then we'll inshallah.
I've got one question for you. Someone asked me the other day, he was talking about Islam and the Big Bang Theory. I'm only asking this because it's related somehow. what he said was that we should actually believe in the Big Bang Theory, because what does the Big Bang Theory say? It says gas is formed, whatever, and then it's blew up and things came into being. Now, doesn't Islam say that there's nothing there before and that Allah made it in 7 days? So isn't that similar? So what's the harm in believing that? What would you say to that?
So I think like the Quran definitely kind of indicates that we start off from something, right? That's why there's this well-known debate in Islamic history about whether the universe was created at some point in time or whether it was eternal, right? So that debate is very famous if you go into our tradition. So I think Big Bang definitely kind of aligns well with the perspective of scholars who believe that it's all started. So you definitely can have a very strong correlation there. Yeah, that works. But I just wanted to also add, you mentioned Sheikh Nukeller and Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. So personally for me, right, these guys are my teachers, right? Sheikh Nukeller, I have full respect for both of them. In fact, I even sent them copies of my book. I may disagree with Sheikh Nukeller on a few points, but I hope that the book kind of shows him where I'm coming from. But these guys are these scholars, and they deserve our immense respect. So I wanted to make it clear that I don't say we should reject. I'm saying we should just definitely have a conversation. So even though I review Sheikh Keller's perspectives and some ideas, I kind of say, well, what about these possibilities? This is in no means of undermining their status. They are our ulama. They are inheritors of the Prophet. They have to maintain that. We always maintain that respect for them. But this is just an intellectual dialogue. And I hope that through this, maybe we can have something forward in there, inshallah. The last thing I wanted to mention is that I wanted to clarify this because I think people might be confused, and this was just alert to me, that many people think that our scholars in the past, Ibn Taymiyyah, Ghazali, etc., they talked about evolution. They have no idea about evolution. It's a new theory. It started off 100 years ago. They never discussed it. So because they never discussed it, it's going to require a new response. Now, my perspective is simply this. If you take the methodology, the outlook, the principles of the past, how will that work in action with this theory? So I'm not saying Imam Ghazali would say this. I'm saying if given his methodology, this is what you can conclude with. So these were some of the things I wanted to clarify there.
Masha, fantastic. I'm looking forward to getting your book now. I think that's my next book on the list now. I'll have to put all the others to the side and just read this because it's very interesting. I didn't really realize it would be this interesting. But Masha, I think the overview you gave of the chapters, I think that's what's got the interest going, inshallah. So I just want to really thank you for taking this time. I know you're very busy, mashallah, probably studying your next PhD, but mashallah, I think you're doing fantastic work. Obviously, I want to congratulate yourself from Green Institute that, thank you for taking time out and especially giving us this basic understanding in this short lecture. Well, I say lecture because that's what it seems like anyway, but this short conversation that we're having with yourself. And I hope people who are listening actually share this video, this link wide to their friends and family, because I think it's a very important subject, especially for our coming generations where this atheism is on the high and it's just going to get bigger and bigger, the movement. So I think it's very important that our future generations get a better understanding of Islam and evolution so they can better live their life in today's society and better be able to communicate with those people around them. So thank you very much once again for taking the time out, inshallah. And no doubt, hopefully this isn't the first time. I hope it is. And I'm looking forward to your next project because I think that's a bigger project, like you said. And we're looking forward to get some insights on how that's going and what you will bring to us bring to the table up with that, inshallah. So thank you very much once again, inshallah. I will share your link amongst our listeners. So if anybody out there is interested in the PDF document, I can send you a link. Please do email me at info@radiodawn.com, inshallah, and I'll forward that to yourself. And Dr. Shoaib, if anybody's interested in finding out more about itself or wants to link up with itself, is there any way they can contact you?
Yeah, so you can just approach me on my professional email. Shall I type it in for you or shall I say it out loud? Like, how do you
say it out loud, it's fine.
Yeah, so my name, it's my name, Shoaib.Malik. So SHOAIB Malik, MALIK, at ZU.AC.AE. So that's Shoaib.Malik at ZU.AC.AE. And that's my email. If you want to get in touch, feel free to do so, inshallah. And then we can take the conversation from there. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to yourself, Brother Nasser, to the Kareem Institute. I really appreciate it. I hope that we can definitely take more conversations on in the future.
Because we have a lot of youth here that are actually interested in intellectually, learning more about Islam as well. And, because it's like I say, a lot of them are interested in further education. So I think this is great to improve the intellectual capacity and better understand the work that they do and the studies that they do, and inshallah help them in the Islamic life as well, inshallah. So Jazakumullah khairan once again, inshallah. And I really look forward to reading your book and then giving you some feedback on it, inshallah, as well.
Inshallah. Perfect. I'd appreciate it. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.